I couldn't help watching Trump's speech on Monday night, described beforehand as the unveiling of a grand new strategy for the 16-year-old war, thinking, what the hell is new about any of what he is saying? Which also seemed remarkably vague to me, what he was saying as well. So first, big picture here, Juan, what am I missing? What is new about Trump's new strategy for Afghanistan?
Well, Trump's announced strategy is the Biden plan for Afghanistan as opposed to the Obama plan.
What does that
mean? I'm sorry?
What does that mean?
When Obama was elected, he also had a study done of what should be done about Afghanistan. He asked the Pentagon for 3 plans, a minimal one, a medium one, it was Goldilocks, and a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And they hemmed and hawed for about 9 months and put him on under a lot of pressure because Congress was demanding to know what his policy was. And by the end of his first year, all he had from the Pentagon was the big plan, which is obviously the one the Pentagon wanted, Petraeus and others.
The 100,000 troops.
The 100,000 troops.
Yeah.
But associated with the 100,000 troops was Petraeus's big think about what he called counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency is addressing a guerrilla war through political as well as military means. So they had this mantra of you clear the Taliban out, and then you come in and establish security, and you build up local institutions so that they stay out. So clear, hold, and build was the mantra. And then ultimately bring in, the central government to keep things going. So, all of this counterinsurgency thinking comes out of the colonial period in the 20th century, and the British did this when they were the colonial masters of what was then called Malaysia, against the communists. And counterinsurgency is kind of the great white whale of the army, because it actually only ever worked in Malaya, but we keep hearing about it, in Vietnam and ever since. It's all in Iraq and Afghanistan. Counterinsurgency was going to work, and it does. Actually the British had been in Malaya for 100 years. They knew the local languages, and the insurgency was only among the Chinese community there, so you could isolate them. And there were peculiar reasons for which maybe they had some success there. But John Mearsheimer once pointed out the British aren't in Malaysia anymore either. So that was the big thing. And Biden was against it. Joe Biden, the then vice president, wanted what was called, instead of counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, which is much more narrow. You're not trying to clear out the Taliban from a place and substitute an Afghan government presence. General McChrystal at one point said we had a government in a box we could bring down from Kabul. And everybody was mystified as what in the world did he think he was talking about, because governmental capacity in Kabul is very limited.
Right.
But in any case, Biden thought, well, if somebody attacks something, go kill them.
Right.
You focus on the terrorists and their actions rather than on trying to rebuild the whole society the way Petraeus wanted to do. But Obama went with the counterinsurgency plan, and if you read the newspapers, in 2011 and 2012, was all about these campaigns in these rural areas of Helmand province, and Kandahar was going to be done, and so forth. Needless to say, it all crashed and burned. There was no serious success of Petraeus's counterinsurgency campaign. And on the other hand, the situation in Afghanistan is not like Vietnam. There's no real danger that the Taliban are going to take over the government and kick us out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have heavy weaponry. They don't have an air force. They don't have really allies very much. The Indians don't want them there. The Russians don't want them there. Maybe behind the scenes there are some Pakistani generals who kind of support them. But, as long as there's somebody in the country who can go kill them if they look like they're going to take over something big, then they're stymied. They can have political influence, but they're just not going to be able to take over. However, if the U.S. got out, I don't imagine that the government in Kabul would last more than a year.
Well, and I want to get to some of those details as far as why we're even still there and how, if ever, we get out. But I'm still trying to understand what it is that Donald Trump is calling for that has not been tried before. Never mind previous countries that have tried to control Afghanistan, but just the last two U.S. presidents trying to come up with some strategy there. The biggest thing that he seemed to claim, all right, instead of nation building, we're going to kill terrorists. I think that's what you were describing, Juan. But beyond that, the big change seemed to be that, well, we would not, the schedule would be based on conditions rather than timetables. Well, that sounds a lot like George W. Bush's "we'll stand down when the Afghanis stand up," no?
Sure. Well, the hope is, basically the United States has become a colonial nation in the 21st century. And the hope of all colonial nations who don't want to stay forever, some do, is that ultimately there would be somebody in the country that you could hand the thing over to, mm-hmm. and it wouldn't collapse on you or come back to bite you. So, that's what the British did in Kenya, and it worked out all right in Kenya. Mm-hmm. But then there's failed decolonization, and you keep getting drawn back into it because the local place that you had been ruling as a colonizer just doesn't have the resources or the capacity to stand up a new government. And whatever resources and capacity Afghanistan had to be an independent country were destroyed from 1978 forward, once the communists took over, and then Reagan conducted what I call the Reagan Jihad. He got the Muslim fundamentalists all together, including what became Al-Qaeda, to kill the communists. Since that time, since 1978 forward, the Afghanistan has been roiled and in turmoil. I figure a couple million people have been killed. You figure 3 wounded for every killed, so that would be 6 million wounded. A lot of people don't have one of their feet because of landmines. The country has no real resources. It's very poorly educated, highly rural, very low incomes. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. So this is just not a place that, especially given what was done to it in the last 30 years, that is very likely to stand up a government the way that Jomo Kenyatta did in Kenya so that the British could leave. So this is one of the reasons the U.S. is stuck there.